Hi everyone, Julie Berninger here from Gold City Ventures. We have another episode of the Crickets to Cha-Ching's podcast, and I have a special guest for you today. We have Sarah, who is an expert crafter and just overall amazing businesswoman. Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, let's kick it off by having you give a quick intro of yourself for everybody.
Okay, so my name is Sarah Edwards, and I have a Cricut crafting website called craftwithsarah.com, where I share tutorials and crafts on things you can make with a Cricut machine, primarily paper crafting. That's sort of the niche part that I focus on, but I also am a digital product seller. I sell SVGs, which is digital files that other crafters can buy and then cut out with their own Cricut machine or other type of cutting machine. So that's a lot of fun creating and just playing about with paper all day, which is lovely.
I love getting paid to do something creative and fun. And I think when we were little girls thinking of our dream jobs, I used to love doing crafts. I did the Girl Scouts, which is a big thing in the US. My daughter's actually just getting started. I'm excited. But we did crafts all the time. And now the idea that you can make your lifestyle and get paid to craft is really cool. So super excited to chat with you about that. So for those of you that are crafters and you're creative, this is going to be your episode where it's your jam. We can talk about crafting. But also for those of you that are looking for ideas of what to sell, we're going to get into some of the trends around what crafts sell and why and the psychology behind that, because the worst thing you can do is just start putting stuff on your Etsy shop and hoping it sells. We're going to get into the background of specifically that. So Sarah, let's start it off. Can you just tell us about the crafting community? Like, you've been in this community for a few years. Can you explain who are the people that are crafting and buying these files and why?
Okay, so I think the last couple of years, especially since the pandemic, crafting at home has grown quite a lot, and there's a lot more people with Cricut machines than there were a few years ago. And I think kind of maybe the audience has changed a little bit over the last couple of years as well, but it's, I would say, predominantly a female kind of based audience. We've got lots of mums who are making crafts for their kids to wear to school, or decorating their water bottles or their lunch boxes. And then you've got women who are making gifts for birthdays and Christmases and all special occasions, and decorating their homes and crafting for, giving things to charities for them to sell to help fundraise. But also there's lots of people that have their own businesses where they make things, physical products, that they then sell as well. So there's a huge range of people and why they might be crafting, but we're all kind of joined together with our love of just getting messy and making things and having that moment where you're like, I made this, yay.
I had that moment during the pandemic, as you mentioned, where I bought a Cricut, and we talked about this before that we started, but I made my dad a t-shirt. It was his 70th birthday and we were hosting an event, and he wanted a shirt that said, "I'm sorry, I'm late. I didn't want to come." I don't know why. He thought that was hilarious. And so I made him this shirt, and I was so proud. Although the letters, I used the Cricut plus the heat press that it comes with it. And I think it's called the Easy Press. I don't remember. But the letters were a little bit off. So my first craft, I was proud of it. It was a little off, though. But it was fantastic. And I've actually been crafted or given a lot of crafts and gifts like that lately. So I think the crafting world has only grown. There's a lot of people that are interested in this. So let me ask you something. We talked about Cricut. Are most people that are doing this, are they using Cricut? I know there's Silhouette, there's some competitors. Is Cricut the biggest one, though?
I think at the moment, yeah, Cricut definitely is the one that most people have. You mentioned Silhouette. There are also scan and cut machines, which I do see being used. I actually ran a poll in my Facebook group about 2 weeks ago and asking what type of machines people had. And I would say probably over 90% said they had at least one of the Cricut type of machines, as opposed to any of the others. And I think what's really nice about Cricut is they do make them quite simple to use, especially compared to some of the others, which are more like traditional vinyl plotters, take a little bit more figuring out, whereas Cricut do kind of, it's not always smooth sailing, sometimes there are software issues or something like that, but on the whole, they are pretty easy to use, and I think that is why they're kind of the leader in the different types of cutting machine.
Got it. And then just to set the stage, because I know a lot of us see the term SVG used with these designs, can you explain the process of a crafter? Like, they're looking for an SVG. how does it work with the Cricut for someone that doesn't know?
Okay, so Cricut machines have a piece of computer software or a mobile app if you're on a phone or a tablet called Design Space. And that's what you use to create all of the projects that you then want to cut with your Cricut machine. And they do have an inbuilt library of images and projects which you can use, but you can also upload your own, and that's where SVGs come in. So you could either design your own if you are familiar with a vector-based drawing software or with something like Canva, or you can download designs online, either if you find them for free or if you purchase them, and then you just upload them into Cricut Design Space. There's a big upload button and it tells you on the screen what to do at all the different points, and it will come onto your project, and then you can change the colors or the size. And so depending on what you're making, if you're making something to go on a greetings card, you'd probably want to make it smaller, or for a big frame to go on the wall, you can make it bigger. And there's lots of different options to customize. You could add text or names or whatever you want. So especially if you're new to Cricut, then starting with an SVG of something that you know you want to make can make it a lot easier, having the sort of design process done for you. So you're not just starting with an empty screen.
Exactly. Okay, so in terms of the paper crafts, because you mentioned that's primarily where you focus, in my mind, I'm seeing a birthday card for somebody where it's like a 3D cake or something like that. But obviously, there's a lot more SVGs than that. When you are saying paper crafts, what would you say like 90% of what you're doing is greeting cards, or what are the scenarios where people are doing the crafts with paper?
So yeah, greetings cards is very popular. But also what the area I kind of focus on is more kind of making a frame to go on your wall. So it might be, for instance, a dog, and it comes in different shapes, and then you sort of build it up layer on top of each layer to make a 3D sort of stacked appearance of all your cardstock. A bit like if you are a crafter, you might know traditional decoupage technique, where you sort of add little bits of foam square sticky pads in between the layers to give it some depth and build it up to make something a little bit dimensional. And then you would mount that in a frame, put it on the wall as your own piece of custom artwork.
Okay, cool. So not just greeting cards, people are also using these crafting tools and buying SVGs so that they can make their own essentially wall art. But it's more, instead of just a two-dimensional image, like let's say, for example, St. Patrick's Day, they're doing like a shamrock, but it's really cool and it's multi-dimensional. So that's the type of stuff that you see people buying.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's nice is they can be customized so much. You can cut it out from whatever colors you want, or what materials you want. You could make it shiny or glittery, or you could pare it back and do it really, sort of plain and minimalist. And I love with the Cricut that there's always something you can do to make it unique to you. There's never going to be, if you had two people make the same thing, the same SVG, it's always going to turn out different and unique and look lovely.
Cool. So if you were giving advice to someone that's trying to do this as a money-making venture versus just crafting for fun, what would you say would be the major use cases? Like, oh, you need to learn how to make this type of file because the trends that I'm seeing the last couple of years are skewing this way or that way.
So if you wanted to start designing the files as opposed to selling the finished crafts, then I think they're both kind of completely different ways that you'd look at it. But with the files, I would definitely recommend just getting involved in some Cricut Facebook groups or something like that. Just see what people are making and see what's popular so that you can tap into kind of the current trends and things around that, or use, softwares that tell you the different kinds of trends. But also think about holidays. Holidays and crafts go together so well. So if you are starting out, just focusing on something like Christmas or Halloween or birthdays is probably going to be a good place to start, because so many people want to make things for those specific occasions.
That makes tons of sense. And when we see the same thing in the printable space, and I know you mentioned that you even got started selling printables and you kind of moved more into the crafting space. So you probably totally have seen that in both worlds, both the printables and the crafting world too. Would you say that people that are buying this for like wall art, the wall art is what they're buying for themselves? So think decor that would be seasonal decor to help them celebrate whatever upcoming holiday. But in the case of like what it would be gifted, it would be more the birthday card celebration things. Are there any gifts that aren't cards that you see popular right now?
Yes. So again, you might gift someone a frame or a piece of artwork, but also stepping away from paper craft. Things like if you're doing the vinyl crafts, making t-shirts or personalizing items like water bottles or makeup bags or lots of different things that you can buy, tote bags. If you have a friend who loves unicorns, then you can cut a unicorn and put it on something and know that it's not just something you've bought from the store, but it's something handmade and you've tailored it specifically to them. So it makes a really sort of thoughtful gift.
You mentioned to look in Facebook groups for trends, but I'm just curious. You talked about dogs. Can you just give us some ideas of trends? Like, are you seeing things that are cards for kids, or is it more like actually cards for adults are more what people are interested in? Or are you seeing, you mentioned specific things like unicorns. Are there certain things that like, okay, llamas were really big 4 years ago. We don't know why. Gnomes are huge. Like, can you, even if it sounds random, like, can you just give us a starting point of trends that you're seeing?
Yes, so you said gnomes. Gnomes are some of our best sellers. We have, I think, over 200 different gnomes, like for all different seasons and different sports. And so I think it's tapping into that trend. So we said gnomes are really popular, the kind of gonk style with the big noses and the hats and you can't see their eyes. But then we kind of took it one step further than that and then started thinking, okay, well, what sports are popular? We can have a gnome playing tennis, we can have a gnome playing football. So we sort of found something that worked and then took it a little bit further. And I think if you have got something that you have proven that is a popular topic, to sort of think about what else you can do. But also, yeah, general popular things. I mean, you could even go into, a clothes store and see what kind of clothes are currently being sold, and that gives a nice idea of the kind of things that are popular as well. But also, if you're crafting something and you want to be making something for someone that you know and love, you know everything about them, sometimes something really, really specific can actually be a popular design if not many other people are doing it. For instance, when I started, one of the very first things I did was dog breed SVGs. So I sort of started with the popular ones like Labradors and obviously Shih Tzus, because I've got a Shih Tzu, and kind of they did really well because people were buying something that they could make of their dog. So it's got that strong emotional tie. But then we started doing the more obscure breeds, ones that I'd never even heard of, and that was still quite popular, even though it is much more niche. But you're targeting those people who can't normally find anything for their dog because they're not one of the popular breeds. So I think also thinking about things that, whilst they're never going to be your number one seller, there's enough of an audience out there that, it's still a nice thing to do.
I love that idea. And it reminds me, so I'm in this business mastermind. It's called Hampton. And there is another guy who's in the mastermind. They're not all digital people like us necessarily. He has a fancy dog food company that he leads. And he was asking for advice on marketing. And I just remember talking about Etsy and saying, hey, you need to pick dog breed and pick small dogs, because I have a 110-pound dog, and I typically, when you have that large dog, you're not buying the most expensive dog food. Sorry, Dallas, my dog, but it's just so expensive when you add up for a dog that eats that much. Whereas I remember from work, I had coworkers with little dogs, and they would be buying really expensive, fancy dog food. So I was telling him, like, oh, you need to niche down to find those really hardcore breeders or breed people that love their dog and they're so into it. It's just cool to hear that it also applies to crafting, which makes tons of sense.
It does.
So in terms of you talk about the gnomes and stuff, that, even though gnomes are an adult thing, I would say. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My daughter doesn't really care about gnomes. She likes unicorns. Gnomes, not so much. So in those situations, you're talking about like a gnome sports team or whatever. I can't even imagine. What's the scenario? Like, why would a customer want a gnome sports team? What do they even do with it?
So a lot of the time that is to go on birthday cards or something, to make a card. And primarily I do see it as kind of adults making things for other adults rather than making for children or children doing the crafts. So I think it's just, with the gnomes as an example, they're kind of cute and they make you smile. But if you've got someone who's obsessed with a certain sport, giving them a card with a generic gnome on is lovely, but giving them one with a gnome that looks like that one specific thing that they're passionate about, it just means that it's extra, extra, extra just for them. Yeah.
Wow, I love that because I have thought about adding the trend for gnomes plus a holiday, but I never thought like gnomes plus holiday plus sport or something like a Halloween soccer gnome. Like that is just like blows my mind next level, but that makes tons of sense to me. Okay. So in terms of just the cost of all this stuff, and I want to circle back. You mentioned at the beginning you could sell finished crafts. Is that a thing? Like are there crafters either on Etsy or in your community that are selling and shipping crafts and people are buying them? Like what are the economics on that? Like how much does it cost to make the craft? What would you sell it? And is this like 5% of the people, or actually like finished crafts are way bigger than the digital files?
So I think there is a much bigger market for the digital files, and I think a lot of that is just because, with a digital file, you can make it once and sell it 100 times. Whereas if you were doing something physical to make 100 of them, that's going to take you a really long time. And it is lower outlay because you're not having to make it every time. But I do definitely see people selling their finished crafts. I know of several people who have bought my files that have their own Etsy shops and things like that. They do a lot of the shadow box frames that I was talking about. Most of them do kind of tend to do the dog themed ones. I think on Etsy, kind of dogs and dog breeds and doing something that matches your pet is quite popular with people that are looking to buy a physical thing. So yeah, I mean, you would need obviously to buy the design or to make it yourself. They're normally around $5, and then you can use that as many times as you want to use it. And again, whilst the machines themselves are a few $100s to buy, once you've bought it, you've got it. So, you can use it as much as you want. And then you've got your sort of consumable items. You've got, if you're doing a paper project, you've got to buy the paper and the craft, the glue and things like that do run out. So you do need to build that into your pricing to remember that if you've bought a certain type of cardstock and it was however much per sheet and you're using 3 sheets, build that in. I think the ones I've seen, they kind of vary depending on the size, but around sort of $30 to $50 for a frame, and then the postage on top. I guess you'd probably need quite good supplies as well if you're mailing something that's got a glass front in it to make sure it doesn't break. But yeah, there definitely is a really good industry of people that sell their finished Cricut projects.
Okay, and that makes sense. I know my sister loves her golden retriever. She's a member of their family, and I can see her liking a gift of a shadow box golden retriever. So is the keyword, when we're talking about keywords, if someone were listening and saying, oh, let me just see what we're talking about here, what are the keywords that people are typing in? Like I get they're typing in whatever SVG, but for the finished products, like you talked about shadow boxes, in the case of the gnome, is there a gnome application of a finished product, or that's more about someone wanting the SVG to make themselves?
I think for the gnomes, it probably would be something to make yourself. But I think you'd kind of be targeting things like gifts for dog lover, gifts for golden retriever mum, gifts for gnome lovers. So there's kind of generic Etsy searches that someone might be making because they know the basic idea of what they want. They know the theme, but not, they might get a bookmark or a magnet or a frame or a t-shirt. They're not sure what they want. But if you can sort of find the people that are searching for that theme, then I think that's a good place to start at looking for your customers.
Okay, cool. So let's say that somebody doesn't want to make the finished product. They want to sell the digital file, the SVG file, and they want to learn from you like how to actually make the file, make it cool, all that stuff. And then they're wondering about selling it on Etsy. I know you have, I think I was looking at your shop, you have 14,000 sales. Like that's awesome. So congratulations.
Thank you.
For getting into the world of SVGs, there are a couple myths. I want to bust some myths. So the first myth is that it's not going to be worth it because it's too low price. But you actually mentioned $5, which is more than I thought. So would you say that's kind of the average price of what a file goes for nowadays?
I think it's on the upper percentage for just one single file, but the types of design I do, the layered paper crafts, they do kind of command a higher sell price than the more simple kind of one color little thing that you might cut out and put on a t-shirt. because there's lots of layers, lots of pieces. One design might take me 10 hours to draw. So there's a lot more of a time investment. Whereas if you're doing the t-shirt designs, which might sell for more like a couple of dollars each, you could probably do one of those in a couple of hours. So you're making more designs quicker for that, but at a lower price, or you've got the designs that kind of take a little bit longer, but then you can sell them at a higher price. So it just depends what you enjoy doing as well, because you might not want to do something really, really complicated and might prefer the simple ones. It means certainly if you're new, you can try out a lot more topics or themes or things a lot quicker if you're doing the simpler ones to start with. So yeah, there's definitely lots of different options. And of course, you can bundle products together if you wanted to get a higher sale price. So maybe, if you had 10 gnomes, you could put them in a bundle for cheaper than it would be to buy or 10 individually. And then the customer gets a great deal because they're getting it cheaper, but also you're getting that higher sale.
And would you say for the stuff that you're selling, is it mostly the shadow box layered stuff? Are there other things too that you see a hit on the SVG side? And are you representative of the whole community? Because before I went on your page, I hadn't seen SVGs that were like this. Like I would look up, for example, I saw in eRank that sunflower SVG was trending as a popular one for whatever reason. Then I put it into Etsy search bar, and the sunflowers that showed up were really just like very basic. I'm not even sure what people would even use those for. So I'm just curious, are you more of an outlier and you're like, oh no, I'm just in a sub niche or whatever, but there's this whole other thing going on? How would you describe where you fit in the realm of crafting?
So I think I am a bit more niche. There aren't as many people that do the layered paper crafts. I think part of that is that they do take a lot longer to design, but also I think it's quite important that you test them, because if you're making something that's got upwards of 20 different pieces, you want to make sure they're all going to stick together right, and you want to provide instructions so that someone, when they buy it, they know how to put it together, because I think that's quite frustrating. I've done it before where I've bought SVGs from other people to make something, and if they don't come with instructions, then you end up just getting frustrated and not making it, and then you might not have a positive experience with that particular seller. So I think if you are going to go on the more complicated designs, certainly testing them or having someone test them for you. If you know someone who loves doing crafts and would like to get your files, maybe in exchange for giving you a photo of the finished product or something, that's definitely a great idea. But also, with the more simple designs, something I'm seeing quite a lot over the last year is the introduction of using AI to help you with those designs. So I think that's going to be interesting in the next couple of years, seeing how AI does impact SVG design, because if you can hand draw something, but then the computer can do it in a second, and the end customer might not necessarily know the difference when they're looking, they don't know what would make something hand drawn and what would make it AI. So I think coming up with something that makes you stand out above all of these designs is going to be something that is definitely going to have to be thought about soon. And yeah, that's going to be really tricky. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I think half the people listening are going to be like, "Oh, AI is coming. It's going to be bad," and then the other half, like me, are like, as soon as you said that, I'm like, I'm perked up. I'm like, because there's so many AI nerds now like me that are like, how can I use this to my advantage? How can I want to make money with this. I want to figure this out. So, oh man, I find that encouraging because obviously getting proficient in this takes a while, and humans were prone to error, but if there's a way that we could use AI. So are you going to be covering this? I'm just curious. Do you have pieces that you've covered so far about using AI yet, or are you testing it?
I have given it a go, but it's not something I'm particularly excited about in terms of design, because I think it's just going to get so hard to stand out and be noticed against all the AI designs. Which is why I think the paper crafting side is quite good, because so far I don't think there's really that much AI involved. But yeah, I think if you've been working as an artist for years and years and years, and all of a sudden someone that has never picked up a pen or pencil can do something that looks similar, that's really dangerous from a creative side. So yeah, personally, I'm not overly fond of AI in that sense, but there's also a huge crafting side where AI is really popular, which is more the sublimation crafting, which is a little bit different to a Cricut. So a sublimation printer has special ink in it that's heat activated. So you could print out a picture of a sunflower in all the different colours you want, or it could be a photograph, and then use your heat press or an iron to put it onto a tote bag or a t-shirt or something. And there is an awful lot of AI art being used for sublimation designs now. And I think that sense, they look really nice. I've done some of that for some previous kind of events I've been working on. So yeah, it's that fine line between where is it helpful and where is it good and where is it harmful from a artist's perspective. It's very
Totally.
interesting.
Totally. And I feel for anyone, all of you artists that are listening, I'm sorry that this is happening, and I'm not trying to come across insensitive to that element of it. I think it does help to make art more accessible to more people that don't have those necessarily, not really the physical talents or time to cultivate those talents. It does help us kind of get things out of our brain onto paper, which is cool. But I totally hear you on that. Okay, so when you're mentioning the sublimation, that interests me because a couple of years ago, I started seeing sublimation show up in the keywords on Etsy, and particularly regarding tumblers. And anyone who sold tumbler designs, digital files for tumblers, was huge. Now, the interesting thing, when the Stanleys came out, I don't know, did people want plastic tumblers as much anymore? I mean, I think we used to give them out as we have a prize if you reach 100 sales on Etsy with us. We send you a physical gift, and we used to give personalized tumblers. But now we changed it to a planner, a productivity planner instead, Erin Condren planner, because we just feel like now that we have the Stanleys, a lot of people don't want the plastic tumblers anymore. But it sounds like you still think that tumblers and sublimation are still like raging, and that maybe how would you describe where this trend is at? Like, are we still in the really high of it, or is it coming down? And what I'm kind of experienced with the Stanley is more true.
I think sublimation is growing because as they get developed more and more money's going into the R&D, the sublimation printers are becoming cheaper, and also you're getting ones that are bigger, they can print larger at a reduced price than what they might have been even a couple of years ago. So they are becoming more accessible. If you're just a home crafter, then now you can get a good sublimation printer for about the same as a Cricut. So you've then got the choice. And if you do the kind of vinyl crafts where you might want 3 different colours, if you were using a Cricut, you'd have to buy, say, red, white and blue vinyl. So that's 3 rolls of vinyl. That's probably about $30 or something. Then you'd have to cut each colour individually. You'd have to weed it, which is where you use kind of like a little needle tip to pick out all the bits you don't want on your final t-shirt. And then you'd have to press them one at a time onto your design, making sure they all line up. And it's quite a lengthy process. Whereas if you've got a sublimation printer, you can choose any design. It can be as complicated as you want, because anything a normal printer can do, you can print on a sublimation printer. And then there's no weeding, no cutting, no anything. You can just get out your heat press or your iron in 5-10 seconds, up to a couple of minutes of pressing it, depending on what you're putting it on, and it's done. And you haven't had to buy all that vinyl to make it. So I am seeing a lot of people who traditionally would have done stuff on the Cricut with the vinyl move towards more the sublimation market. So that's been really interesting to see how that has changed and all the different blanks you can buy now. I recently got a sublimation printer, so I've been looking into it a little bit, and there's so much you can get that can then be personalized. And I think as well, if you're selling a physical product, having something that you can sublimate is going to be great, because the blanks are really affordable most of the time, and it doesn't take long to do it. You just choose the design, size it, print it, press it. You're probably done in under half an hour. If you did a little production line, if you had lots of the same thing, you'd be much quicker. Or you can customize it again completely. You could print out names or photos. It gives you lots more ideas of things that you could sell as a physical product, but that doesn't take so much time that it then becomes so much, it's that thing of, if it takes you 10 hours to do and you sell it for whatever, you're making minimum wage. Whereas if you can make it way, way, way quicker, then all of a sudden it becomes a lot more of an option to do that.
Yeah, and that makes sense because that was one of the reasons that I abandoned the Cricut heat press thing was because one, like when I was doing my dad's t-shirt, I bought a very few choices of vinyl, so it was a blue t-shirt with white writing because I couldn't quite figure out the colors yet. And then I messed up with the weeding and one of the letters was a little bit off. And I'm like, I'm sure I could have gotten better at it, but I'm like, oh, this is really difficult. And then I kind of felt wasteful. Like, I know vinyl is not the best for the environment. I don't know about sublimation if it's also not good for the environment. But that's my thing with crafting. Sometimes I'm like, craft in the environment, you can produce when you're not good at it, you can like produce a lot of waste, I would say. So I kind of felt bad about that element of it. So I don't know. Do you know if sublimation is better for the environment, I guess? Is it just ink?
It is just ink on paper, yeah. So you could probably recycle your paper offcuts and things. And yeah, you're not buying all that plastic. But I'm not sure how it works in terms of printer ink and things like that. That probably has some manufacturing environmental impact.
Probably. Not that I'm an expert in this in any way, and I mean, I'm sure you'll see I got papers all around here, so I'm not perfect in that aspect, but something I always think about. Okay, so when you're wrapping up this sublimation, let's say that someone listening is like, okay, I'm not necessarily drawn to doing one thing or the other. I just kind of want to know like where the best opportunity is. Would you say this when someone we're talking about SVGs as well for the sublimation? Okay, so they're all SVGs. What would you say, if you're a new person coming in, what would you say it would be? Would it be sublimation is what you're like, hey, you should learn this, or you're like, oh, like you should learn paper crafting? What would you suggest?
Okay, so sublimation is a little bit different because you wouldn't use an SVG file. You'd use like a PNG or a JPEG or something. So more of a printable file, kind of something that you might design in Canva, or you could do it in Photoshop. If you are more familiar with that kind of traditional graphic design or photo editing, then you might find sublimation easier. Whereas with the SVGs, so SVG is scalable vector graphic. It's a special type of file, which means you could make it the size of a business card, or you could blow it up to go on the side of a billboard, and it would still be perfect quality. Whereas the printables, which you would use with sublimation, they're kind of, you can't stretch them or they start going a bit blurry and pixelated and don't look as good. But I think if you were looking to start doing the designs, the sublimation, especially if you did combine sublimation with AI, would probably be a lot more straightforward to get into, and you could certainly produce more in a quicker amount of time if you were doing it with the AI. But one thing I would strongly say is if you're going down the AI route, check your images. We don't want horses with 5 legs or, things that don't look right. And that's definitely something that I think there's a lot of on Etsy is bad AI. So if you can do it and make it good and make them look right and do a little bit of photo editing, then that's going to put you already head and shoulders above the people that just churn out all these images and put them up without actually making sure that they look right.
That makes sense. I was hearing a creator that kind of does similar work to what we do at Gold City Ventures, and she was complaining about a lot of digital junk that was showing up, how like so many people want to start digital product shops that they're creating just a bunch of junk. But I don't think it's the actual people. I think, like you said, it's somebody that's just mass using AI to just throw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. In terms of trends, just real quick, we talked about tumblers, but I was skeptical that tumblers were not a thing. It sounds like you think t-shirts is actually the play for sublimation, like tote bags. What, if you're like, hey, I start with these 3 products, like where would you even start looking?
Yes, so I think the wraps, the tumbler wraps, I do still see an awful lot of them being posted online of things people have made, and mugs as well, just kind of your normal tea and coffee mugs. I think an indicator that they are a popular product is that Cricut released a dedicated mug press not too long ago, but maybe about 2 or 3 years ago now. So if they think you need a specific machine just for mugs, they must have a strong sense that mugs are popular. Also baseball caps and things like that that you can personalize, and yeah, anything wearable too. I think even socks or things like that, or you might do sublimation earrings are quite popular as well, where you get it's kind of a little white plasticky blank. It's got polyester coating on it, so you'd put your design on there and press it, and then have decorated earrings. So again, that's quite nice, and that would be easy to post because they're small and they're light. But yeah, there's so many different things, and I think because it is moving quickly and the industry and the area and the products are still growing, you might have something that is just so amazingly popular for a couple of months, and then suddenly no one's making it anymore and everyone's making something different. So I think being able to just follow the crowd a little bit and see if you see something taking off, that's the time that you want to maybe see if you can get in on that, rather than when it's already up here at the most popular it's going to be, when it might be a little bit harder to stand out. So yeah, there's so many different things. It's hard to pinpoint.
And I was surprised you said Cricut. So is the brand for sublimation printer or whatever? Cricut is the dominant brand, or what are like the top brands?
So for sublimation, it's Cricut don't really do sublimation. They have their own product called infusible ink, which is kind of like sublimation ink, but it's pre-printed, so you don't need the printer. With sublimation, the Epson EcoTank printers are what a lot of people use, because you can just buy sublimation ink and put that in the machines rather than your normal ink, because you sort of inject or pour the ink into the tanks rather than having the cartridges. Or Epson do specific sublimation printers, and also there's sawgrass printers which are popular as well for the sublimation. And yeah, I don't think for the heat presses there's any specific brand that is a sublimation needed, because it's the same thing. If you've got a Cricut Easy Press, that'll work for your Cricut crafts and it'll work for your sublimation crafts. So yeah, just the Cricut presses I think still do quite well.
Okay, thank you. And I just bought an Epson EcoTank printer. Wasn't aware that it did sublimation, so I'll have to look into perhaps one I bought. I'm not sure if it's this particular one or all of them.
Well, technically they don't.
Oh, people are hacking it.
You can sort of hack it by buying the ink and putting the ink in, but you can only do that if you've never put normal printer ink in it. And then once you've put the sublimation ink in, that's it. It's a sublimation printer now. And you can't use that for like your regular printing, because when you print it, the colours are really dull and sort of almost faded. So if you printed a sunflower, it would be a really pale, kind of almost dirty yellow when it comes out the printer. But when you press it and you put the heat on it, that's when all the colours come out and it looks so lovely and vibrant.
Okay, so I know I said that was the last question. I have one more question. You obviously know so much about this, and your channel is a wealth of knowledge, and we'll give everyone more information on that in a second. But where you mentioned Facebook groups or Reddit communities, I was actually listening to a podcast where I think it was Steph Smith, who's into trends. She was saying how the biggest communities on Reddit, a lot of them are actually crafting communities, which I wasn't aware of, and that makes total sense. Where is someone going? Like, do you know the names of anything specific, or you, like, how do you know this? Where did you learn this from?
So I think Facebook groups for crafts are still huge. I know in some niches they're maybe not as popular as they once were, and maybe people have moved on to other places, but for crafts, Facebook is huge. And there are so many groups for different types of, even just different types of machine or material or theme. So I think if you found a crafter that you like and you like their tutorials, just see if they have a Facebook group. They probably do, and join there, and it'll just be full of people sharing their crafts, sharing pictures of what they've made, asking how to do things. But also I think what's really helpful is you also see people asking questions, or they're stuck with a particular thing, and it's such a friendly community of people offering help. You see someone post hey, how would I make this, and within an hour they've got 5-10 different replies of people all being really helpful. So if you're new to the crafting world, then just joining a couple of groups can you'll just learn so much and see so much. And then you'll probably have a list of about 1,000 things that you want to make.
Awesome. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on. I know you have a summit coming up. What is the topic and how can people learn more about you? Like, can they follow you on YouTube?
Yes, so I am Crafter Sarah on YouTube. My summit that's coming out, it's a little bit different to a traditional summit where you'd have lots of different people take part. It's just the Craft with Sarah design. So it's 14 days long, 14 days of flower crafts. So it's called the Floral Craft Countdown. And that will be running in July. And I kind of run these as a way for me personally to try out loads of crafts that I might not necessarily always do because they don't particularly fit my niche. So for me, because I don't tend to get a lot of time to actually make fun things because I'm working on business things, it's a way to try out new techniques, but also to share those. So every day for those 14 days, you would get a free SVG cut file. It's free to download for 24 hours. And you get the project and the video tutorials with it so that you can make it. And then we all join in the Facebook group and share pictures every day of all the different crafts. And it's just a really fun way to just learn new things or fall back in love with your Cricut or get all your gifts made for the next few months. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Okay, great. Well, we'll include the link to that below. Thank you so much for coming on. And if we have any crafters in this community and you like this episode, leave a comment below or email us, team@goldsteadyventures.com, so we know we can do more episodes like this. Thank you so much, Sarah. Have a great day and appreciate it.
Thank you so much.